Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. So I want to start today with a premise that, I have to be honest, it sounds a little bit like conspiracy theory logic.
It does, doesn't it?
Or maybe something out of a sci-fi novel. But the stack of research you sent over, it really has me looking at my calendar in a completely new way.
I get that.
The question is this: does a single date on the calendar have its own DNA?
It seems like numerology at first glance, right? We're kind of conditioned to think of dates as just empty containers. Tuesday is just the day after Monday.
Right, and February 11th is just a day in late winter.
Exactly.
If I look at February 11th on my calendar, I might see a note to, buy a Valentine's card. But you're arguing that if we look at the historical record, this specific date, it's something heavier.
Much heavier. One of the authors in the source material calls it a curatorial node.
Curatorial node, I like that phrase.
It's a great way to put it. Think of it less like a spooky coincidence and more like a core sample of history. If you drill down into February 11th over the last 60 years or so, you don't just find random events. You find a very specific, and I'd say unbroken chain of resistance.
And we aren't talking about minor events here. We are talking about four massive anchors that, they really define the global struggle for human dignity.
Absolutely.
We've got Malcolm X in London, 1965. We've got the catalyst for the Memphis Sanitation Strike in 1968.
A huge moment.
Then Nelson Mandela walking out of prison in 1990. And finally, the fall of Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, 2011.
Exactly. And the mission for this deep dive isn't just to list those dates and say, hey, look, they match.
Right.
It's to show you, the listener, how these events are actually chapters in the same book, whether it's 1965 London or 2011 Cairo. The sources argue these are just evolving tactics in the same long fight.
The same fight against state power and economic exclusion.
That's the thread.
Okay, so let's test this theory. Let's go to that first anchor. London, February 11, 1965. Now, most people know Malcolm X for his work in the U.S., Harlem, the Nation of Islam, the split. But why is he in London? And why is this visit so important?
The context here is just, it's everything. This was his fourth trip to Britain, but the clock was ticking.
How so?
This is February 11. He was assassinated on February 21.
Yeah.
He had 10 days left to live.
10 days.
Yeah.
So he's moving with a kind of urgency.
Incredible urgency. And the London he stepped into, it wasn't the swinging 60s of the Beatles. It was tense. He arrived right in the middle of this massive racial controversy in a place called Smethwick.
Smethwick, that's in the West Midlands, right?
It is. And for anyone who might not know their British political history, the election in Smethwick right before this visit was vicious.
Vicious how?
The winning candidate had effectively campaigned on a slogan, and I'm paraphrasing here to keep it clean, but it basically implied, if you want a black neighbor, you should vote for the other guy. It was just explicit, ugly racism.
So Malcolm isn't just there for a speaking tour. He's walking right into a hostile environment.
He's walking into a war zone of ideas. And on February 11th, he pulls what you might call a double header.
Okay.
He speaks at the London School of Economics first. That's the high ground, right? Debating imperialism, capitalism, all the big isms.
The academic setting.
But then he leaves that ivory tower and goes to All Saints Church Hall in Notting Hill.
And Notting Hill back then was not the Notting Hill of romantic comedies and million-dollar townhouses.
Not at all. It was the front line. It was a community hub for the Caribbean diaspora who were facing what they called color bars.
What were those?
Landlords would literally put signs in windows. No Irish, no dogs, no blacks. That was the reality.
So this is where I want to push on that connection idea. Malcolm talking to black British people is interesting, but how does it link to this global chain you mentioned? Was he just offering moral support?
It was so much more strategic than that. This is the aha moment of that 1965 node. Malcolm was trying to reframe the entire conversation.
Reframe it how?
He stood up and told that audience that the struggle in Alabama, the struggle in Smethwick, and the struggle in the Congo were the same struggle.
He's triangulating it.
Yeah.
He's connecting all three.
He's engaging in what the sources call internationalism. You see, as long as the civil rights movement was just an American problem, the U.S. government could treat it as a domestic issue. We'll handle it.
Right. Keep it in-house.
Malcolm wanted to take the case to the United Nations. He wanted to charge the United States with human rights violations.
That is a massive shift. He's trying to take it out of the U.S. court system and put it in front of the world court.
Precisely. He saw London not just as a city, but as a relay station. He was connecting the African-American fight to anti-colonial fights in Africa and immigrant rights fights in Europe. On February 11, 1965, he was building a global infrastructure for resistance.
Which makes his death just 10 days later all the more devastating. He was just getting the blueprint finalized.
He was, but the blueprint survived. And that brings us to our second anchor. We're jumping 3 years forward, February 11, 1968. Memphis, Tennessee.
Now, when people think of Memphis in '68, they usually think of Dr. King's assassination in April. But the sources we're looking at say you just can't understand April if you don't understand February.
You can't, and you can't understand it if you don't look at the labor conditions. We're shifting gears now from Malcolm's, international geopolitics to the really gritty reality of labor and dignity.
So set the scene for us. Why were the sanitation workers in Memphis so angry?
Well, it wasn't just the low pay, though the pay was abysmal.
Really bad.
Many of these men worked full-time jobs picking up the city's garbage and still qualified for welfare. Think about that for a second. But the spark wasn't pay, it was safety.
And the sources detail this one specific tragic incident on February 1st. It involved two men, Echo Cole and Robert Walker.
It's a hard detail to read, but it's essential. It was raining hard, and Memphis didn't allow black sanitation workers to shelter in the cab of the truck. That was for white drivers only.
So they had nowhere to go.
So Cole and Walker took shelter in the back of the truck, inside the hopper. The compactor. An electrical short triggered the mechanism. They were crushed to death.
It's not just an accident. It's a direct result of segregation. If they had been allowed in the cab of the truck, they would have lived.
Correct. And the city's response. They gave the families a month's pay and barely even acknowledged the negligence. It sent a very clear message. You are disposable. You are equipment, not men.
So that brings us to our date, February 11th, 1968, 10 days after their deaths.
Tensions have just been simmering. And on the night of February 11th, over 700 sanitation workers cram into a labor hall. These aren't professional activists. These are just guys who are risking their jobs, their livelihoods, by even being there.
And they take a vote.
They do.
What's the outcome?
Unanimous strike.
A unanimous vote from 700 people. I mean, that's almost impossible to get on anything.
It just speaks to the shared trauma. 2 days later, 1,300 men walk off the job. And this is the moment where that famous "I am a man" slogan is born.
This feels like a real pivot point in the chain we're talking about. Malcolm X was talking about high-level human rights. These men are talking about the right not to be crushed to death by a garbage truck.
But they're the same conversation. That's the entire point. The source material calls this a hinge moment. Before this, you had the labor movement, which was often white-dominated, and you had the civil rights movement. Memphis fused them.
It proved you can't have racial equality without economic justice.
You can't. And this is what pulled Dr. King in, right? He didn't start the strike.
No, he came to support it.
He came to serve it.
Yeah.
He realized that this was the next phase of the dream. It's not just about sitting at the lunch counter. It's about being able to afford the lunch.
So we have the intellectual framework in '65. We have the economic leverage in '68. Now, let's jump 22 years. February 11th, 1990, South Africa.
The image seen around the world.
Nelson Mandela walking out of Victor Verster prison. We've all seen that footage. He's holding Winnie Mandela's hand. He's raising his fist. It looks like a victory lap.
It does. It absolutely does. But if we want to understand the DNA of this state, we have to look at what was happening behind the scenes. It wasn't just that the South African government suddenly, grew a conscience.
Right. President F.W. de Klerk had unbanned the ANC and other liberation movements just days before. But why then? Why February 11, 1990?
Because the strategy that Malcolm X hinted at, that international pressure, it had finally matured. Sanctions were crippling the South African economy. The country was becoming ungovernable from internal resistance.
So the system was breaking.
It was breaking. But there's a specific document the sources point to, the Harare Declaration.
Okay, walk us through that.
The Harare Declaration was, in essence, the terms of surrender for apartheid, and it was drafted by the ANC. It set the preconditions for any negotiation. So when Mandela walked out on February 11, he wasn't just walking into freedom. He was walking into a negotiation that the resistance had already framed.
There's an interesting tension here, though. I mean, Mandela was the co-founder of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC. He was a militant.
He was. And that is the crucial link back to our chain. In 1965, Malcolm X was advocating for the right to self-defense. In 1990, Mandela represents the transition from armed struggle to governance.
It's the graduation of the movement, in a way.
That's a good way to put it. The sources describe it as a political flowering. The seeds planted by that global anti-apartheid movement, which Malcolm helped water, which labor movement supported, they finally bloomed. It proves the chain works. Pressure, sustained over decades, breaks stone.
It almost feels like a tidy ending.
Yeah.
We went from the struggle to the victory, but the timeline doesn't stop in 1990.
Not even close.
And this is where the sources throw a real curveball.
The 2011 curveball? Yeah.
Exactly. Anchor number 4. February 11th, 2011. Cairo, Egypt. Hosni Mubarak resigns. Now, I had to play devil's advocate for a second. We've been talking about the black diaspora, civil rights, apartheid. Why are we suddenly in North Africa talking about the Arab Spring? Is this really part of the same DNA?
It's a completely fair question. I mean, geographically, culturally, it seems distinct. But the source material is very, very firm on this point. You cannot separate the struggle in Tahrir Square from the struggle in, say, Ferguson or Soweto.
So what's the connecting tissue?
The police state.
Okay, unpack that.
Think about what sparked the Egyptian revolution. It was the killing of a young man, Khalid Sayed, by police. It was emergency laws that allowed for indefinite detention. It was an entire population saying, we are being policed to death.
Which sounds exactly like the grievances that would spark the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S. just a few years later.
It's a mirror image. The sources talk about a rhyme in history. The tactics used by Egyptian security forces, the tear gas, the kettling, the militarized response, were the same tactics we saw in Ferguson, Missouri.
I remember reading at the time about activists in Cairo actually tweeting advice to protesters in Ferguson on how to deal with tear gas.
Exactly. That right there, that is the unbroken chain in real time. The sources argue that February 11, 2011 extends the definition of African independence. It's not just about getting rid of a European colonizer in the 1960s.
It's about the ongoing fight.
It's about the ongoing fight against authoritarian state power, whether that power looks like a white police officer in Memphis or an Egyptian security officer in Cairo.
So it's about the fundamental relationship between the citizen and the state's monopoly on violence.
Yes, and dignity. The chant in Cairo was bread, freedom, social justice.
Bread, freedom, social justice.
That is the Memphis Strike, bread, the Mandela release, freedom, and the Malcolm X vision, justice, all wrapped up into one slogan.
That's actually kind of mind-blowing when you stack them up like that.
It really changes how you see the map.
So let's zoom out and look at this independence calendar, as the sources call it. We have these 4 nodes.
1965. Malcolm X internationalizes the struggle. He builds the intellectual bridge.
Go.
1968. Memphis workers localize that struggle to wages and safety. They build the economic bridge.
Right.
1990. Mandela proves the struggle can win state power. He builds the political bridge.
And 2011.
2011. Cairo shows the struggle is now against the mechanics of policing itself. They build the modern bridge.
And the sources mention other echoes on this date, too. It's not just these 4 big ones.
Right. There are these fleeting but really poignant mentions. The hip-hop producer, Dilla, passed away on February 10th. His funeral was right in this window. The police shooting of Amadou Diallo in New York happened in February. These events resonate with the exact same themes: culture, police violence, the value of Black life.
It's almost like the date itself acts as a magnet for these stories.
Or a metronome, just keeping the beat of a very, very long song.
So if we accept this premise that history has a rhythm and February 11 is one of these curatorial nodes, what are we supposed to do with that information? You know, besides just circling the date in our calendars.
Yeah. I think it cures us of the idea that these problems are new or that they're isolated. If you look at a protest today and think, oh, that's just some local trouble, you're completely missing the bigger picture.
You're ignoring the lineage.
You're ignoring the lineage. And more importantly, I think it poses a challenge to us.
What's the challenge?
Well, think about it. Malcolm X in 1965 could see the connection between a small town in the UK and a war in the Congo. The kids in Cairo could see the connection between their square and the streets of America.
Right.
So the question is, what connections are happening right now that we aren't seeing?
That's the scary part, isn't it? We usually only see the pattern in hindsight.
Exactly. So on February 11th of next year, or even today, what is the next link in that chain being forged? Is it in a warehouse organizing drive? Is it in a digital rights movement, climate justice fight in the Global South?
The chain is still being built.
It never stopped. We just have to learn how to see it.
Well, I am certainly never going to look at February 11th as just a Tuesday in winter ever again. It's a heavy legacy, but it's an inspiring one.
It's a reminder that the fight for dignity is the longest project in human history.
Thank you so much for walking us through this hidden timeline. It's been a fascinating Fascinating trip around the world.
My pleasure.
And to you listening, take a look at your own calendar. You never know what history is happening on a random Tuesday. We'll see you in the next deep dive.